I'm personally very excited to introduce Nolan, a man who obviously needs no introduction. I've had the pleasure for a number of years in pre-Google context of working with Nolan, and I can assure you that whatever we do here, it will be insightful and something you will take away. And hopefully it will be useful. As you're probably aware, Nolan is infamous, or perhaps famous, I'm not sure which, as the founder of Atari and the creator of Pong and a number of other interesting things in the entertainment vein, from Chuck E. Cheese to interesting entry into the gaming industry through managing Midways. So Nolan has, I believe, as encyclopedic a knowledge of the way games are enjoyed by people throughout the world as I've had the pleasure to meet. As a brief introduction to the online game industry, which I'm sure we'll hear a lot more about, it's often underappreciated in terms of its reach, in terms of the number of people and the breadth of the demographics that play games today, online as well as offline. And one recent statistic that's often cited to make this point is that there are more consumer hours invested in online gaming today than in either Facebook or other social networks aggregated together, or in the playing of online video. So with that, Nolan Bushnell.
Well, you know, when I first agreed to do this with Google, it was with the whole idea that I was going to chum the Google people to come to my restaurant in Mountain View. So you still have to go to the restaurant in Mountain View. You have to understand that. I thought I'd start by talking about big ideas and one man's process. And there are a lot of things in the world that are just kind of little ideas for a little product, little thing. You can't really make a company out of them. And so I try to always look for ideas and things that have the potential of being global in scale and massive in size. Big ego. I don't know. I think that the intersection points of businesses are really, really an important area, as well as economic discontinuities. Wherever you have a discontinuity, generally, if you can get rid of that discontinuity, you can make a lot of money. And I'll explain that a little more later. And then there are areas where there is universal dissatisfaction. Now that's not just, people gripe and that, but if this griping has been going on for a long, long time, like Muzak on hold after going through a 340-step, auto dialing sequence, there are a lot of things that you can do. So ways around that, all of a sudden you've got a good opportunity. And then I always think that another good way to figure things out before the time is that science fiction has it. You just have to read it as potential history. The intersection points of business, if you look at it on plate tectonics, that's where all the earthquakes and the volcanoes work. And so if you can mash two businesses together and ask yourself the question, what do you do there? What's happening there? And so in some ways, I mashed the computer era with pinballs and came out with a video game. Because I worked in an amusement park when I was in college, understood the pinball machine business, and understood the amusement game business. I was in electrical engineering, so I was with the big $10 million computers. And it became very obvious to me that if you could play the games that I was playing at the university, at the amusement park, they'd make nothing but money. But then you do 25 cents a play into, a $1 million computer, the math doesn't work. And so one of the things you've got to understand is I didn't invent the video game. I commercialized it. And I'll show you a little bit of that history in a few minutes. I've got a company I'm working on now that mashes movies and video games together to create a thing called Verix, and I'll talk a little more about that. And of course, food and entertainment, Chuck E. Cheese and uWink, because historically, part of the human DNA is to have festivals and banquets and parties, and they always have food and games and fun. And so these restaurants that I've done are basically a way to have a party on demand. And that's what we're about. Economic discontinuity. It turns out that with casual games, there is a market to buy casual games for 19 bucks. And you say, well, okay, usually if you decrease the price, you get more. Turns out that they sell almost the same number at $10 as they do at $20. The only problem is they make half as much money. And the same thing with $5, and all the way down to 2 or 3. Why? It turns out that once you decide to make a purchase, the amount of money doesn't matter that much. You know, it's only in the bias, and that most of the casual game market, like 99 downloads for one purchase. That's the way the business works. So that it's a try before you buy, and then you buy. So that is a very discontinuous marketplace. And so it really is a great opportunity for us to monetize that casual game through ad sales, and that's with NeoEdge. The other thing about discontinuity is the whole problem with credit cards. Credit cards on the internet are really a bad idea in general. Anytime there is an authentication and a password, I know as I type it in that it can be stolen. Not having a safe, clear, and deep trust relationship with my PC really screws things up. Now, when I take my cell phone, how many times does it ask me for a screen name and password, user ID and password? Never. And yet I have a secure relationship with my cell provider. Every time I pick it up and make a telephone call, there's an economic transaction going on. I'm going to be billed some way for that call. And yet it doesn't ask me for authentication. Why? Because there's hardware encryption between this cell phone and my service provider. That doesn't exist in the PC world to any great extent. And any time that you can do a password authentication alone, it's soft. It doesn't have a private key. And until we can get that fixed, the economic import to the internet itself is a small fraction. So solve that problem, and the problem has actually been solved in some ways, it just hasn't been turned on. The TPM, which is called the trusted platform module, is on about 90% of the motherboards that have been shipped in the last 3 years. That gives you a absolute, secure secret that can give an absolute authenticated relationship one-on-one. And then kids' restaurants and the Chuck E. Cheese thing, that was a discontinuity that I solved. Parents had a little bit of fun in other places, but the kids had the total amount of fun in these other ones. Anyway, universal dissatisfaction, restaurant service, I focused on uWink, login password I talked about, new things to do. I'm also designing a new kind of school, new high school. It's called the Snap School, working title, not a great thing, and casual game purchase. For science fiction, I still think Snow Crash is one of the great ones. Ender's Game, another one. How many of you have tried Anthem? Thick read, guys. It's a great book, but I think, but it's a struggle. It's like science fiction meets War and Peace. Anyway, but I recommend it. Of course, the old classic Stranger in Strange Land has to be done. Oh yeah, that's great, thanks. And you may not know this one, but the Lost Fleet series, great books. A lot of fighting, a lot of running around space in automatic time. It's great. So what are we doing here? think I'll restart later just for fun. Okay. Just for fun, let's take the video game, the early history. This is kind of the chronology. Notice 1958. I was still in high school, so, and pretty dumb. But this is kind of the way it is. This is Willie Higginbotham. This is what I consider to be the beginning of the video game business. It was on an oscilloscope. They actually had relays, charging and discharging capacitors. But it was a game of tennis, and you could play it, and it was, people thought it was fun, but they didn't think it was a business. Then Steve Russell, who was a student at MIT Media Lab, or MIT, did a thing called Space War, and it was on a PDP-1, and this is really the first time that video screens were really connected to a computer, and this is what I played. And almost flunked out of my engineering school one quarter, because in those days you could sneak in, play from about 2 in the morning till 5. It was really bad on studies, but it was really a fun game. And had a blistering 100,000 kilohertz, or that's wrong, 100,000 hertz. Big kilohertz in speed, so. And that display was actually a modified display that was used for radar. It was XY. Things were about this long. Electrostatic deflection. It was cool, but not that cool. Then we did computer space. This is the unit that I built, figured out a new way to do this. This wasn't a computer. This wasn't a von Neumann architecture at all. This was a big, fancy digital signal generator in which if you wanted another object on the screen, you added 8 flip-flops. In fact, actually 16. This was our first brochure. This was a stripper from down the block, and she agreed to be a model for us, and she was a cutie too. This was the early team. There were 2 innovations there. One was the Pong machine. The other one was the spotted shirt. Polka dot shirt did not catch on. But the Pong game, this is Al Alcorn. He's the technical, this is the guy that was stealing money. He was our first CFO. He really was, anyway. This is my head of manufacturing at the time. And I'm not going to tell that story. What am I doing? Oh. This is a Magnavox Odyssey game. This was actually sort of the first consumer game, but it was analog. A lot of people don't realize that a lot of people thought that analog computers were going to be really big. They weren't. With unerring fashion sense, I went from polka dot shirts to this kind of weird sweater. That didn't work either. But the little Pong game sold about 2.5 million units. When we got to tell you that innovation isn't easy. This is one of the most successful consumer products up to that point. When we took it to the toy fair in New York, we sold 0. And we said, how could this be? We know that our neighbors want to get one, and we think it's really cool and everything. Well, it turned out that toy stores at the time, we went to the toy fair, we thought, okay, toys, this is a toy. The most expensive toy that they were selling at that time was $29. And we wanted almost $100 for this. And so they said, not us, Jack. So we went to the television marketplace. It's called brown goods in retail parlance. And they said, no, people want to do a finance on it. So we couldn't sell it there. We said, now we've got a great product here. What's the channel? Well, thank God there was a guy who heard about us. We didn't hear about him. And he was running the sporting goods department at Sears. And Sears in the winter, in those days, turned into ping pong tables and pool tables for the recreation room. And so he thought, well, Pong coin-op is in the bars. Pool tables are in the bars. Maybe we can sell this. So he came over and said, how many can you build? Well, we really hadn't thought of that. So I talked to my head of manufacturing. He says, we probably do 25,000. So I said 75,000. And then, not to be one better, he came back with an order for 150,000 because he wanted an exclusive. And so all of a sudden, challenged with the thought of what might be possible, we set about to build 150,000 of them if possible. But we didn't have any money, which is kind of a problem. And so I called him up and I says, we can't take the order for 150,000. We don't have enough cash to build it. He says, not to worry, I'll introduce you to Sears Bank. And so we had a bonded warehouse. When the units fell off the edge, or dropped off the edge of our production line, we got advanced 80% of the price that we're selling them for. So it kept us in positive cash flow. Incidentally, Atari was funded with $250. And that's the bad news. The good news is that that's how much money I had, and so I was able to get the company started. And how we were able to go forward is by getting our vendors to ship us parts and being able to turn them into saleable product before we had the bills come due. And it's called just-in-time inventory, and it works like a charm until all of a sudden you design in a single source part and you can't get it for 4 months, at which time you almost go out of business, which we almost did. I mean, people always remember success stories, but they don't realize that one summer we had 3 or 4 sheriffs on the door every day to attach assets to lawsuits that we lost. In fact, people are calling me, and they say, Nolan, I'm going to miss payroll next week. And I said, well, how many lawsuits have you lost for vendors that are trying to collect? They say, well, none. And I say, well, you've got months. I mean, at one time we had 9 checking accounts because, you know, when the sheriff comes in, first of all, you buy, you know, $50,000 worth of stuff from vendor A. And the vendor A sues you, and you know that you owe it, so you don't even put up a defense. And so if you want to put up the defense, you can probably stall them another 3 months. But without a defense, it takes them 4 months to get a judgment against you, maybe 5. And then they get to attach your assets. But what they really want is cash. They don't want your desks and furniture and stuff. They just want your cash. And so if you have a whole bunch of bank accounts and you deftly move the cash from bank account to bank account, they can't get it because they get a court order and it says, you know, bank account Wells Fargo 2477765. They go in, they present it, the bank says, no money. And then because now you're paying the bills that you need to pay to keep the lights on with a new bank account, and they see it and they say, ah. And then they go through it again, no money. So you can keep those things going for a really long time. And then you start shipping again, and slowly you get better. And That's in the days when you don't get venture capital. Like, venture capital and me have never been strong friends because they said, the game business, that can't be a serious business. I said, well, I think it is. And they said, nah. And besides that, we all know that coin-operated game business is run by the mafia. So I wanted to raise venture capital, they just wouldn't do it. And then imagine what it's like to go and say, now get the picture. A really, really big pizza parlor. Lots of games. And wait, there's more. We're going to have talking animals. Can you imagine VCs thinking that was a cool idea? I can assure you they did not. Anyway. Then we did the Atari 2600, the first really programmable game, hugely successful. And this is the point where I sold it to Warner, who thought that it was a record player. And they thought that the 2600 was a forever product, and that all they had to do was sell software. And so the day we shipped our first one, I told Warner, I said, this product is obsolete. They said, well, we just bought the company. I said, yeah, but by the time we get the next one designed, this one will be gone. They didn't get it. They just didn't get it. And so, and I said, the 2600, we have square balls on the games, not because we think square balls are cool. It's because the technology is really crappy. We had 128 bytes of memory. Why? 128 bytes of RAM in the thing. RAM was really expensive, and in order to hit our price points, we had nothing. And by the time we shipped, RAM had dropped in price that we would have at least doubled that. Remember that the cartridges were 2,000 bytes? You guys are really spoiled. Did you know that the Atari cartridges also had to keep track in software of the horizontal and vertical blanking and trace amounts? It was really tough sledding. It was all in machine code. So you guys are pikers compared to what we, back in my day, we had to go uphill in snowdrifts both ways. Anyway, these are a few other things. Bubble year for the 2600s, 1983. Warner basically wanted to ship the 2600. 2600 we calculated was end of life in 1979. And if they'd have turned it over like they do now, Atari would have still been the dominant player in the world. They really screwed up my company. I'm really pissed about that. But, oh well. When you sell them, you forget them. These are some of the games that we did. Then we did Chuck E. Cheese. Had a lot of fun with that. You can't imagine the weird things that people do from inside of a Chuck E. Cheese costume. The other thing that you don't know is the weird things that employees do in the Chuck E. Cheese changing room closet. Locked door, small space, anyway. You can also, from sort of the inside, you can't imagine what is in the bottom of the ball crawl after a week of kids' use. And you don't really want to go there. I did a thing called Anderbot. This was the first time I really did what I call a technological faceplant. This was everybody knows that robots are going to be part of the future, and this is so fun. And we were, but the technology was just not ready yet. And it was all about noise immunity. When you have a blue screen of death on Microsoft, it's a you reset it and you go on with your life. When a robot crashes, all hell breaks loose. All your collision avoidance, everything shuts down, and sometimes your motors happen to be going lickety-split in a particular ugly direction. We used to call this the mow the baby mode, which was kind of a problem. And what would happen is when the robot would be going over carpet, it'd pick up static electricity, and the discharge between the bearings or between that and other things would reset the computer. And we put them in Gaussian enclosures. We did all kinds of isolation technology, and we couldn't get it to the 99% kind of reliability that we needed. And then we did a company called ETAC. ETAC now is, I sold it to Rupert Murdoch at News Corp, and a lot of the core assets, map assets that you're using in Google Map and everything else from TeleAtlas is based on the ETAC database. Did you know that we had all kinds of DEC 750s doing this? Can tell you how long ago it was. I mean, the amount of heat those things would throw off was just amazing. ComPower, my company invented the switching power supply. I just wished I'd have kept a nickel for every switching power supply there is in the world. Buy Video, this was sort of the core technology. In fact, Amazon bought a lot of the patents that we had on shopping. This was on a kiosk, used a big laser disc. Boy, was that crappy technology. Magnum Microwave, this was about street hopping and networks, wireless networks. This was, I sold this. Axon, I did a toy company, little robotic cats and dogs and bears that talked. Sold it to Hasbro. That was kind of a lame company too. Then I've done uWink, which is a restaurant. It has touch screens at every table. You can dress it up for the various fun times. This is our location in Woodland Hills. This is our location actually in Mountain View. This is on Castro Street. And we have entertainment and fun. This is the Mountain View location. It's good for a girls' night out. Just have to throw that in to make sure you're awake. You sit down and swipe your credit card. You can then order your food and drinks. This is guaranteed quickest time between sitting down and having a martini in your hands. I think that's real progress. And the reason is the touchscreen order, you don't have to wait for a waiter, and the person who's building it does it immediately. We have all kinds of fun stuff, Truth or Dare. What kind of game is that? It's a game in which you can have a lot of fun. We made a mistake early on by letting some of the cocktail waitresses do the dares. We almost lost our liquor license. If you can imagine the combination of alcohol late at night and a prompted game, one of the questions was, or the dares was, exchange a piece of clothing with the person on your right. That can get out of hand. When we built uWink, we decided we wanted it to be aimed at women 21 to 35, under the theory that every woman that's older than 35 kind of wants to be and thinks of themselves as 35. Every woman that's younger than 21 kind of wants to be 21, and that all the men of all ages want that demographic, you know. So if we can get the women 21 to 35, we thought we've got it pretty much knocked. Then we have group games in which the whole restaurant can play against each other. And it's not just all trivia. We have this one called uWink Scene Investigation, where you're shown a picture and then you're asked questions about it. And we regularly have an 8-year-old or a 10-year-old that'll win that one. They're actually better than the adults. This is our food menu, good burgers, appetizers, what have you. You can make modifications, and it actually happens because the kitchen gets it. Most of the time that you make a modification to your food and it gets messed up, it's always your waiter. So you can feel good in not tipping. Again, things, alcohol, games, and it's not just games. We have comedy stuff, weird things, explore, where you can have views of various places. It's pretty fun. This is our 6-player game. You say, why 6-player? Well, people come in 2s and 4s. What we want to do is have people mix around these tables. We've actually got an electronic foosball, which is actually more fun than the regular one, I think. Wine tasting. So you can order 3 glasses of numbered glasses, and it asks you names about it. And we can teach you in about $20 how to be a wine snob. So that's a pretty good deal. And you get the wine. I've been on the chairman of the board of NeoEdge Networks. And NeoEdge does some very interesting things. It basically enables gameplay. And this is under the characteristic of a discontinuity. And it's a huge discontinuity. People play 7.6 hours of games per week. And they watch 26 hours of TV. So theoretically, ad-enabled games on a parity basis should be worth about $300 million. Because TV ad revenue, cable, and everything is about $100 million. Some people say 60 to 80, but I think it's more like about $100 million in TV ad sales. So it should be $300 million for game revenue. I mean, game revenue currently is less than $300 million, but it should be $26 billion. That's a discontinuity. Why is it different? Well, because a lot of the gameplay is not ad-enabled, and NeoEdge can do that. And I believe that through the technology of making the games more ad-friendly, making the games more accessible to other lifestyle things, that $26 billion is there. And so if you're in a business that's going to grow by at least 2 orders of magnitude, that seems to me to be a big thing to do. And right now, there's some socialization, but not a lot. And so we can put games back into the network. And you play, there's a little font problem here. Puzzles. And let's see if we can do a, you know what, I bet this isn't going to work. As we moved over, let's see. I had an embedded little movie in here. Nope. No. Oh, maybe it is. Where the first tab. Where the arrow's pointing. Oh, okay. And okay, there we go. So what this does is it shows you how, well, it's not quite right, but there's actually some other stuff. Let me see. It's a little better. But this shows you how you can take a regular casual game, playing along. The Goodyear blimp is actually not part of the game. We don't have to worry with SDKs or anything like that. and we can put the Goodyear blimp in, we can do a lot of stuff. But most games lock you up, and you can't do other things. We've got an ability to pull yourself out of a game so that it becomes integrated into your regular experience. The game is now on pause, you're doing your little Starbucks thingy, you're going to be able to climb over and get a Google map or MSN map, I don't know, maybe you're not allowed to say that in this room, am I? It's, but notice we can also put Budweiser on the kegs over there. You thought it was grog, but it's not. And we can pull the information out of the game to give scores. So this is all generated. This is synthetic stuff that we have. And I don't like that little girl, but it's you know how certain kids just, you know, I've got 8 kids, and some of their friends you really don't like very much. Actually, some of your own children you don't like very much for a certain stage. There was a lot of story that the space program was actually designed to put, so that we could have a place to put children until they become 21. I don't know if that's true. Swiffer sponge mop, that's kind of a dirty old mop for that. But anyway, that's kind of a look at what we're doing here. Let me climb back here. Okay. I'm also on the board of a company called Wave. And Wave is a software company that enables the TPM, which is a Trusted Platform Module that's on about 90% of all the laptops. And the difference between hardware and software encryption is that hardware is really, really hard to break. I mean, really hard. And in your cell phone, you actually have hardware encryption in a video game, you know, that is selling you various cartridges that you can't crack. Those are hardware encrypted things. You need a private secret that is embedded in silicon. And until you get that, all bets are off. And so password is really soft. And until we get rid of that, a lot of the economic opportunity of the internet is going to actually fail. So I just say, add trust to the relationship, say no to username and password. Every time you have a username and password, it's wrong. Just think that. If it has a username and password, it is wrong because it really fails to do what it's promising to do. Because if I can put in a username and password, any idiot who wants to steal my stuff can do it as well. Whereas if I have a secure relationship, they have to steal my whole damn computer. That's a harder thing, and I know it's gone. That's the more important thing. When somebody steals my computer, it's gone. And so you want to have a virtual private network between your computer and anything else that you're dealing with. And wonderful things start to happen. I want to have the same relationship with myself that I have with my cell phone, with my computer, but I also want to have that same relationship with my garage door. Because I want it hardware encrypted as well. And I don't want to have to stand on a stepladder and put in 3355. And I would like to have a hardware encrypted relationship with my Bluetooth. And I would like to have my hardware encrypted relationship between my car and my home network. All of these things are possible under the network, under the encryption, and the hardware is there, you just have to turn it on. And if Google really wanted to be instrumental in tomorrow's ecosystem of the internet and change the economics significantly, they could do a lot to spearhead some of these initiatives. In the entertainment market, there's a company called Verix that I'm working with. And it is basically a mashup between a movie and a video game. Now, what do we know about the video game business right now? That physicality is becoming increasingly important. The Wii, Rock Band, Dance Dance Revolution. It's more fun than pushing buttons. And so, we rent 4,000 square feet in a mall near you, and we give you the non-Terra experience. What you don't realize is that in a mall, that you can volunteer to become part of the rescue party that will get the non-Terra Space Lab back online. You probably didn't even know it was offline, but it is. The non-Terra Space Lab had a virus introduced just last week, and all the robots on the Space Lab are down. That's a problem, because the damn Stinnons are out there trying to get us, and now we're blind in that whole section of the galaxy. So, what to do about it? 8 trusted and intrepid people coming into the mall, crossing the Palm with $12. I will transport them into space where they will have a problem. First problem, they have to get through a laser beam web to reactivate the security locks. Once they're through the security locks, they have to sneak stealthily past the material handling corridor where the whole floor is alive and changing. And if you don't do it the right way, you die. And then, once you make it past, because actually we're pretty forgiving, not many will die. And it's not because we don't want to kill them, it's just our legal liability is too much. It's purely mercenary. Then you need to load the reactor, and you put together, dilithium crystals, and put them on a belt, and then you start up the reactor, and then you find that there's a real problem. Turns out that it's made for a robotic crew, so the reactor isn't shielded. So when you start it up, you get irradiated. You basically nuke yourself. But the transporter, in order to get back down, requires the power from the reactor. So you're really in trouble. But we've provided a way out. You can actually steal enough antimatter out of space on an 8-player game that if you get it fast enough before the reactor actually starts up, you can save your ass. And so, with that, you've spent an hour, $12 of good money, and you've had some fun. Anyway, so that's Verix. And then right behind that, we've got a sort of an Indiana Jones thing where you sneak through and steal the golden goblet and various things. Anyway. The hardware wars, I was just going to mention that I think that the PC will be it. That set-top boxes, game consoles, TiVos will all go away. I'm going to predict that this is the last iteration of the consoles. That we're so close to photorealism on terms of even the Xbox 360, the PS3, that there is not going to be a definitive reason to upgrade, and the cost benefit isn't there, and that most of the power of the future game market will actually be in the network and not in the hardware. And so the only thing that the game console has provided is an ecosystem based on subsidizing hardware cost with software sales. So, the Xbox 360 costs a little more to build than they're selling for, and they make it back on the software. Well, the media PC with the hardware encryption will be able to create synthetic ecosystems for that. And that will be the next model, in my estimation. So that's kind of what Nolan Bushnell is up to these days. And I think that the business of entertainment and fun, and Google is doing some great stuff. I mean, I believe that I've spent as much time lately on Google Maps, just running around the world looking at crazy stuff, as I have playing games. And that's saying something. But I believe that there's so much more wonderful things you guys can do. And let's not take ourselves too seriously. That's the first step in the road to oblivion. One of my dad's favorite comments that I tell my kids is, just about the time that you think that the sun shines out of your ass, all you have is an illuminated landing area. Thanks. Okay, any questions?
Just on what you last touched on about the kind of, one unified platform, unifying the TiVo, the video game console, et cetera. The one advantage that a lot of these, disparate media entertainment centers have is that they've got their own unique advantages to protecting against piracy. So, looking at, especially in the gaming sector, you don't see pirated PS3, 360, and Wii games anymore because the networking aspect is so key that to pirate the game needs to be wizard interactive, connected experience. Whereas with the PC, even with a hardware locked system on your actual computer, the distribution networks become, unless you have a unified distribution system for your software, it still becomes kind of sketchy as to whether or not your entertainment is going to be pirated. So,
I disagree with that. I really think that the hardware encryption gets rid of the sketchiness. And it will turn into a marketing program, no question about it. But these virtual, think of the PS3 and the Xbox 360 turning into virtual private network enclaves, but using the PC as the delivery mechanism. And some of the games won't go unless you have an NVIDIA, blogga. But at the same time, there is not the economics of doing a new hardware platform aren't there.
Oh, it's a bum game. Producing the hardware is horrible.
Horrible. And Sony is probably going to be looking down the shotgun barrels of a $2 billion write-off. And most of the guys inside the business right now say that the PS3 is over. Just because they haven't hit critical mass for the software. The Sony has always been a very, very difficult platform to program for. And so why spend 5 times as much time programming for a console that has 1/10 as many users? And so the math doesn't work. And of course, everybody's scratching their head over the Wii, still sold out, 2 years later with a processing, number of polygons that's not much better than it was 5 years ago. And yet, gone. And so what it really says is it's the game, stupid. It's the fun. It's the innovation. And entertainment is all about innovation.
First of all, thanks. It's been a privilege hearing you, Nolan. I remember while growing up in India, Atari game systems used to be the only reason I used to stay at home and not go in the evening and play out. So it's been a pleasure meeting you. My question is regarding the Verix that you, the game lobby system that you shared with the
Verix?
Yeah, Verix. So just trying to understand. So these are actual implementations in physical locations that you
Yes.
come and pay up and
Yeah.
experience?
I lied to you. We really don't put you up into space.
No.
No.
No. I'm just working out
It's too expensive.
The economics behind that and why, user coming in paying $12 versus just paying a space game at home in a more on their console, or what? How do you get folks to come into say a mall or a location, pay you $12, and how do you sell that?
every once in a while, people wake up and realize that having 1 million friends online in the dark in your underwear isn't rewarding. And when they wake up to that, the first place they go is to a movie. After they've sort of done the movie thing, then they think, well, maybe the mall. And once you do the mall, you're looking for other things. And people are always when entertainment, a lot of times, is about fighting boredom. And so, anytime you offer something new, you can generally get people to pay for it. And if they walk out of the experience saying, that was a really good time, you might be able to get them to come back. And at the very least, you can get them to tell other friends that. What I've found is that the public space is absolutely as important as the private space. You just got to have both. And that, and the thing that I like about the Verix project is that it's really an ability to also showcase new pieces of technology. Like, did you know that next year, 3D cameras are going to be really big? And these are XYZ, where you can now, remember Tom Cruise in Minority Report, all that stuff? That's real, next year. These cameras are going to be down under $100, and gesture technology is all about that, because now, for the first time, the computer can see that my hand is in front of us. I have a unit, one of the 3D cameras that we paid $6,000 for, I think, like that, in uWink. And we're playing a lot of really, really fun games with that, because now you have that Z component, plus or minus 5 centimeters. And so, all of a sudden your mind comes alive. I don't know how many of you on YouTube have seen the living Tetris, live Tetris games. Now, if you've seen the Japanese one, that's fine, but you really want to go to the Italian one, because the Japanese one has guys in jumpsuits and helmets. The Italian one has them in bikini, hot girls in bikinis, which is a lot more pleasant. Anyway, let's see, where was I? Distracted. But anyway, it's going to be a lot of fun and interesting stuff next year.
So you keep changing the...
Keep changing. I think they'll probably last somewhere around 6 months, maybe a year, and then you swap them out. What we've done is we've created a core system down that you just hang stuff off of. And so it's very cheap to change, it from we've got a whole thing with a NASCAR thing figured out, where you go in and you learn how to be a pit crew and change tires and do all sorts of stuff against the clock, get a score. If you do well, you can brag against your friends. If you do bad, then you have to sulk. But I think physicality is important, and I think it'll be something that may not be a dominant factor, but $1 billion business here, $1 billion business there, it's worth going after. Yeah.
So moving forward, do you think that,
Can we just?
moving forward, do you see advertising becoming the primary way that games are monetized, or do you see advertising sort of augmenting the existing models?
I think that that advertising in games will represent somewhere between a $10 and a $25 billion marketplace annually, and it's, to me it's very obvious. The advertising world looks for accountability, being able to target market. I mean, at NeoEdge, we can send it to your zip code. We know how old you are. We know whether you're rich, poor, what have you. So we can really hit that target very, very directly. And we know that you're doing it, because unlike television, where you could be in the kitchen making a sandwich, or the restroom, or just snoozing or channel surfing, This is real. It's accountable. It's click-throughable. It should be worth on a cost, on a CPM basis, 3 times what a television ad is. And it's a $20 billion business based on parity, just on time. So I think that, I think it's possible that online game ads could be a dominant revenue source for certain demographics. I believe that, yeah.
Yeah, this is kind of actually continuing the same, on that same track with the advertising. Because you say it's obvious to you. I guess it's not so obvious to me, and you know, I can go into that, but I'd like to hear you talk, obviously not myself talk, but essentially, you know, you showed that slide with 26 billion and 100 billion.
Right.
Isn't it, I mean, can't the case be made that television is actually just lagging behind and it's being over-represented, not that gaming is being under-represented?
I think that's a great question. No, I think, well, first of all, there's no question that television is the legacy business. And so it will be slower to fall, and the incumbent business is going to be slower to rise. But that's where I like the arbitrage, because I want to be on the right horse. I mean, the old story says, how do you lead a mob? Figure out where it's going, get in front of it, and say, follow me. You know, and I believe that's what's happening here. Everybody that we have sold advertising to at NeoEdge likes it a lot and comes back for more. That the number of click-throughs, their efficiency, how they've been able to target. I mean, we can target a single area code next to a restaurant. And remember that in a lot of cases, ad agencies are really lazy. And a lot of the game advertising is very, you know, customized, bespoke. Whereas the sort of the thing that is normal is the 30-second spot. Well, we can run the 30-second spots interstitially on games without access to their SDK. So we become very, very much like a television network, but with all the advantages of the internet. And you know, if it's not 25 billion, it's 10 billion, but it ain't 1 billion. It's going to be a lot bigger than that, and it's going to be the right demographic.
I guess fundamentally, the model, like fundamentally the ad model, where the advertisement is shown in the same area or the same medium as the regular content, but is actually an orthogonal form of content. Fundamentally, like I guess showing Google, right? What Google's done with AdSense and AdWords, they have matched the advertisements, match the user's intention. You're doing a Google search, you see the ads, you don't really consider them ads because they're matching your intention. Whereas traditional advertising, you're watching a show, you're playing a game, you're listening to the radio, now you have an ad that is completely orthogonal to the actual content that you're consuming. Same thing with Facebook. So fundamentally, how do you resolve, it seems that that's kind of the old model where it's an orthogonal model, and having the harmonious model seems to be the new way. But
well, would you say that seeing a GM ad on CSI Miami is orthogonal or directed?
If it's just like a commercial, I'd say that's orthogonal.
It's a commercial.
Right.
But but it is not like I was thinking that what you were saying is that if there's an ad over here where my fovea is here, then that would be orthogonal. But if you have a game and then it breaks to a ad and then it goes back to the game, I would see that as linear. And what you're saying is that you consider orthogonal to be that I'm thinking about pirate ships, and now all of a sudden I want you to think about Prel.
Right.
Okay. that is an advantage that Google search has, no question about it. But if I have a pirate game and I'm selling grog, that should work. But at the same time, the typical ad model of anything has to be somewhat disjointed, just because of the nature that we would love to have as much of that. We're not going to sell a lot of things to teenagers with Google search. It's just not going to happen. But we can do young adults and young women who are not necessarily searching for car insurance and what have you. That's going to be a big enough market for us. No question about it. Yes?
You mentioned intersection between businesses earlier.
Uh-huh.
And your experience with music, not music, but video games and entertainment and film and movies and that sort of thing. I'm just curious of your thoughts of the future of the integration between all those different sort of platforms, like whether it's internet, movies, live entertainment, where you see it going in the future.
One of two ways. I believe that ultimately it's a network, that there is a data storage on premises in your home. It's going to be relatively small. I believe that all screens like this, you'll just hang them on the wall, and with firm encryption, it will be available. Speakers will be separate. You hang those on the wall, and it becomes totally distributed Wi-Fi throughout the house. And that Wi-Fi net includes your automobiles in your out in front. Once that happens, everything becomes virtual. I believe that all physical media go away. I don't believe that we will have anything other than our hard drives, and those will move within another 3 years, probably all solid state, where the moving parts go away. And that movies will be consumed that way, and there will be a variety of business models all the way from ownership to watch once, as well as music will be. I have felt for a long time that microtransactions are the answer to the problems in the movie or the music business, because most people have a price at which they're willing to be thieving bastards or honest. And that price for various people is a different number. I think most people who are a fan of Pink Floyd or a fan of REM would be willing to, when they download a piece of music that they did, to give them an applause. So 25 cents to 50 cents for that music. And, this is no DRM, in fact, I'd pay 50 cents just to get rid of DRM on everything. And by making it simple and easy to give 50 cents to any band as an applause, I believe that they would make more money than they did when they were selling overpriced CDs. And all of a sudden we've got the business back again. But because I don't have a good relationship with my computer, it's frictional. Because, as much as I love some of these guys, I'm not going to put in my credit card number and my password and all that other stuff. It's just too much friction. Get rid of the friction, and all of a sudden the world will become rationalized, because it's about efficiency and ease, because we're all lazy. But most of us want to do the right thing.
So you're predicting the demise of video game consoles,
Yes.
where PCs will take over. So one of the benefits of consoles is you have a special purpose piece of hardware that's just dedicated to gaming. and you know that everyone has that same exact platform, right? So you have consistent experience across gamers. So how do you see that being replaced with the desktop, where you have a much more heterogeneous set of computing hardware?
I believe that everything becomes software, and that the software will take care of most of those issues, and that the network becomes the dominant factor. And I think that a lot of the hurdles that we've been jumping over with the hardware slowly go away. I mean, think about how much better USB was than serial ports. I can remember spending a Saturday afternoon setting interrupt keys on a plug-in serial card. You know, that was a real big pain. And I used to ask myself, what happens to people who don't have an electrical engineer in the house? Even though I wasn't a very good one. So it slowly gets easier, I think once we get full deep encryption, just being able to wave your computer next to a device and have it mate gets to be very, very easy. And slowly all those things go away. And then what you're dealing with is a total virtual world in which there will be businesses that are VPNs that are the equivalent of today's Xbox 360, in which they will sell a bunch of user interfaces and the software to go along with it. But I think the reason and the whole marketing of the hardware in order to have that VPN relationship no longer makes sense. That's all I'm saying.
We have time for maybe 2 more questions.
Sure.
So more of an open question. When you have an idea, I'm wondering, what's your process to kind of evaluate how successful it will be? And more so, it's not about like when you have a good idea and you strongly believe into it, but also to walk away from an idea. What kind of maybe experiments you do? Do you give it to your friends, your family? Who do you bounce it off? Just an open question.
One of the things I try to do is I write things down. And I probably have 20 business plans that are either aging or festering. Not sure which is the right word. And it's amazing how much things change with the process of time. For example, I've been working on and off on my school project for almost 5 years, and I think I've got it solved. And I've been doing a lot of research on it. And you say, you want to get into the school business? That's not an oxymoron. But I actually think that video games can deliver a tremendous amount of education properly and in the mode that kids want. I have 8 children, and my youngest is 14, and I can see how he likes to learn, and he's not getting that in his school. And there's an interesting little word picture that I want to paint. People in California, every high school student has $9,000 spent on it. The average class size is 35. Now, if you take a quick, what I call shop floor analysis of $9,000 times, it's actually $9,500 times 35, you end up with over $300,000 being spent on that one classroom. And if you look at the cost of renting an equivalent space at commercial rates, even though you have bond issues and things like that, it gets down to the point where you're still getting $250,000 spent on that. And we don't believe generally that the teacher is being spent that much. Where did all the money go? And the money really went to waste, inefficiency, bureaucracy, and bullshit. And so until you fix that, you cannot fix the school system. You just can't do it. You can't throw enough money, and so you have to throw the baby out with the bathwater, or the young children out with the bathwater, and pick them up, drive them off, and put them in the destruction. Anyway, but to be more clear on your other part of your question, I really try to make sure that the things that I work on have headroom. And I like them, I like a lifeboat and a rocket ship. I don't want to work on something that I don't think can be like $500 million. You know, if you can close your eyes and imagine a $500 million business, then I can work on that. And the problem is, a lot of $1 billion businesses don't look like that from the onset. So you kind of really got to be optimistic and play around with it. And look for businesses that don't require massive amounts of cash to get started. That there's a lifeboat scenario where you can sort of figure out ways to do things. The other thing I like to look at is I ask myself, do I really understand this business? Do I have any standing in that world? You know, the old story that, you know, the other guy's business looks a lot easier than the one you're working on. And it's so true. You don't know all the other person's problems. I mean, you got to walk a mile in the other guy's shoes, and then you're a mile away and you've got his shoes. So, anyway. And then I start working on it, and I always have a couple ready to go. I have 5-year ADD, and so I have to absolutely change what I do every 5 years or I go crazy. Anyway, one more.
I've recently watched this YouTube clip from the 80s with you in it. I think they were talking about how the games could be potentially dangerous in terms of, you know, like violence and whatnot. That was in the 80s, I think. This show was called People Were Talking. And I was just wondering what direction you think games are going in terms of, you know, learning games that you could potentially give sell to kids who could learn, you know, learning potential and whatnot with first-person shooters and whatnot. What do you think? In what direction do you think games will go in the future?
I believe that games are a very, very powerful learning tool. If you really look at what makes us like to learn is we like to learn things that are in context to a problem we want to solve. And if we can make things real, what games give you is context. Like if you're trying to save the princess and you have to get to the mountaintop, and on the way to the mountaintop is a gate that's run by electricity, and it's broken, you know, and the only way you can, you know, kill the boss, rescue the princess is to fix the gate. You may find context for you to learn a little bit about electricity. My son in Pokemon knew the characteristics, the names, and some of the vitals of over 100 Pokemon characters. Well, if that would have been Moss Man and Chloropoda Man and various things, he could pass, you know, sophomore biology. Okay? So, why don't we do that? Why don't we create a game structure around the things that you have to memorize for biology, and all of a sudden, you know, we can make a game of it. You know, we can put funny little faces on the little, you know, 3-segmented critters, and we're off and running. I just think there's a lot of different ways we can use media to enhance this educational experience. Remember, when I was growing up, school was the most interesting thing happening in town. I mean, the alternative was watching the corn grow and the river flow, you know. We had a whopping 1.5 channels of television, and you say, how do you get a half a channel? Well, it was only on 3 hours a day. So, you know, school seemed like a real porthole into an interesting world. Right now, we've got a teacher with a piece of chalk competing against advertisements that have cost, for 30 seconds, they had a budget of $3.5 million. Those are production values. And I think an immature mind doesn't know the difference between a bad concept with great production values and a good concept with a piece of chalk. And so that's what's happening. Teachers today just fundamentally outgunned, and will be until we change and use the media that we all know and love to deliver interesting messages.
Thank you very much, Nolan.